That's an interesting question and an important question. Because we could say, if all the stories, they're only of people who descended from there, what hope is there for us? Like I once said to Guru Maharaj, thinking along similar lines, I said, if some exalted soul, like Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, says, Jaghai madhai hoite muise papishta, Purishe rakita hoite muise lagista. I'm more sinful than Jagai and Madhai. I'm lower than the worm. And I said, all right. So he's saying like that. I said, but Maharaj, what if you actually are more sinful than Jagai and Madhai? It's not some figurative metaphor, you know. And Guru Maharaj's response was very interesting. He went, oh, he said, perhaps such plenary sentiments are descending in you. And then he began to describe to me and tell me, inform me. He said, don't think that Kaviraj Goswami, he's posing. Too often we hear like, Arjuna is taking the position of a conditioned soul, like he's just acting. No, when Arjuna is experiencing delusion, it's real. It's heartfelt. It's not that he's saying, oh, I'll act like, Krishna, I got an idea. I'll act like I'm in illusion, and then you act like you're enlightening me. But you know, I mean, we know, you know, you know. Yeah, I know. I knew you knew. I know you know that I know, because I'm, you know, I know that. You know, it's not like that. Arjuna's like, he's trembling as much as anybody. So at first, the thing is we should understand, they're really in the thick of it. Like we're told, a Mahabhagavata descends to the second class position. Now we could describe that in a very spiritual way, but for a moment, tatastha vichar, we can look at it a little objectively and say, well, what's in this intermediate position? Desires. What it's like to have actual desires, mundane desires, thirst, hunger, all the different things that you can have being a conditioned soul. So one way I take it is some of these exalted souls, they're descending into this circumstance. So it's like the old, I mean, they're actually experiencing these things. There's the old Buddhist, like Zen Buddhist thing. They have their whole, where, you know, they tell all these weird stories. So there's the story of like the disciple who comes to the guru and says like, I can't stop smoking. So the guru says, all right, come back in 3 months. And then what the guru does is he becomes addicted to smoking for a month, or then he overcomes the addiction. So when the disciple comes back, he goes, here's how you do it. It's just a story. Don't send me email. You know, like, but you get the idea. He's saying like, so when I actually, let me experience that. And there's some truth there is what I'm trying to say. Just as we hear something about Shankaracharya, who by the way is so great. He's such a great personality when you study his life and story. And we hear sometimes that he took sannyas when he was 9. Right? 9. Like gave up the world. I mean, he's Mahadev Shiva of him. Like, so he takes sannyas when he's 9. So, and he writes his like Sharira Kabasya commentary on the Vedanta Sutra when he's like 12. When he was older. This unbelievably deep philosophical, you know, document. Right? So we hear later, because he has another work called the Maya Mudgara Stotram. Right? Means the hammer for smashing illusion, basically. That Gurudev liked this very much. Hari Charan Prabhu came to me. He always comes to me like to find, you know, like point out if something might be upasiddhantic or not in line with. So the Samadhi slokas, I had the good fortune of being enlisted in that seva of some selection with Tyagi Maharaj, Tirtha Maharaj, some others. And But one I put was from that Gurudev liked, this Dina Jamino sloka. He had it on his veranda on the wall, and it's from Shankaracharya. So Hari Charan was like, like, he's not a, I'm saying, but I just told them, I said, but he's Shankaracharya. We want to show that great, because of all the acharyas in India, you got Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Shankaracharya's always, you have to factor him in. You cannot dismiss him. I said, so this is good, we're showing, and it ends in the Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Mudhamate, Sang, Prapte, Sang Nihite, Nahi Nahi Rakshati, Dukrin Karane, this beautiful thing where he's singing, what is all this Sanskrit knowledge going to do for you if you don't worship Govinda? It's all useless. Give it all out. Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, you stupid asses. That's what he's saying. So you have to love him. And so I said, we've put that there to honor the other great acharya, to show he's got a place in Gurudev's heart and on his samadhi too. And it's this sloka that parallels the Bhagavad sloka that says, both with the rising of the sun, every day you see life going by and life circumstances. I mean, like, start using your time wisely. Don't think that you have an unlimited amount of time here. Anyway, the point is, so that Shankaracharya, as he got older, I mean, he never really got old, to tell you the truth, but as he got older than 12, and so he would hear about Madhura Rasa. He can understand that's the highest thing. He's going like, but what is it? What are they talking about? He's that much of a brahmachari. They're talking about, well, actually men and women, they possess their, and like, I don't get it. Like he just didn't have a clue about, it's similar to Sukadev, right? Sukadev that just doesn't compute with him, factor with him. So Shankaracharya, understanding that he wanted to get some insight about Madhura Rasa. So some king was dying who had queens, a harem, etc. So he entered into the body of that king right at the moment of death to keep the body alive and then revive it. And then so he could understand what eroticism is, eros, the erotic principle. But he knew enough reading about it, the illusion of it, and there's also the famous word, is it? Nari stana barana nabhi desham drishta moga mahavesham. Don't ask for a translation. But so he knew all these things and about the intensity of the illusion of the sexual principle. So he told his disciples, if I get so lost and bewildered in there, then you come and chant these slokas in my ear, and I'll snap out of it. And in fact, that's what happens. He enters the body of the king, he's lost per se in that illusion, and then the disciples come and they start chanting the Maya Mudgara, Moha Mudgara Stotram. Right? I mean, that's the Leela, that's the pastime, that's the story. Right? So, at least first we should understand that when these great souls come, it's also visible in the life, observable in the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We will hear that he'll say in his 40s, he discovers the great Eastern savior Sri Chaitanya Dev and starts studying Chaitanya Charitamritam, and he's captured by that conception. And up to this point, without going into the details, if you observe his life, he appears like a what you might describe as a typical Bengali, not typical Bengali, but typical Bengali, say, aristocrat or highly educated, highly placed Bengali gentleman, high court judge, advocate, and all these, and with a big family, doing everything, marrying his daughters, getting sick, sometimes disease, the Bengali diet, the whole thing. But then as he, in his 40s, he said, but then I came in connection with Sri Chaitanya Dev, and then he starts going very deep, right? Think of it, in his 40s. Now, when I mentioned some of these things to Guru Maharaj, and the wealth of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Guru Dam, Grantadam, Gauradam, Adam, Namadam, Muda, Bhaktidam, Buddhidam, Bande, Bhaktivinodadam, Sada. Then I said, the Jaiva Dharma, just the Jaiva Dharma alone, but Chaitanya Shikshamritam, he also published Chaitanya Charitamritam, Srimad Bhagavatam, 4 editions of Bhagavad Gita, 4 different ones. Just everything we have, all the songs. Right. Then he gave Saraswati Thakur, he did everything imaginable, but particularly these works, like Jaiva Dharma. When Ananta Vasudeva Prabhu, Saraswati Thakur was walking with his followers on the beach in Puri, and Guru Maharaj said, he mocked the section of the Bhagavatam about Rahu devouring the moon and that kind. And Guru Maharaj came forward and said, no, this is real. Everything's personal, his subjective evolution of consciousness program. That everything, you can trace every object's position back to consciousness, and that means personal, etc., without going into that. And he used Jaiva Dharma as a reference. He said, although this may appear to be a fictitious story, he said, I say these things happened in another kalpa, another time, etc. And Saraswati Thakur supported Guru Maharaj. So what I mean to say is, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and if you read that book, we're told also, you can go about as far as, I forget the number, maybe Sahadev Prabhu knows, but like chapter 28, chapter 9, there's a certain point where you realize the next chapter comes like, I can't read, this is beyond me, beyond my capacity to, even the first chapter has so much, but talking about rasa, tattva, and all these things. And then it just goes deeper, higher, deeper, ever. So Guru Maharaj said, in response to my inquiries, he said, yes, when we consider the magnitude of wealth of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he said, then we can only conclude that he descended from the upper world into this plane to distribute something. He's not someone who became a practitioner and then gradually made some advancement and made some literary contributions. When you look at the magnitude of what he's given, you can only conclude that he descended. But that said, right, still, back to the original question, are there any other examples? Still, you have to factor in how you're going to view these things. Prabhupada gave an example in his manuscript called Light of the Bhagavad, which interestingly, he composed this. He had an invitation to go to Japan to attend a conference. So it's almost like he designed this book for the Asian mind. It's all about the autumn season and cloud formations in the sky. It appears on one level to be a little impersonal or depersonalized. It's very interesting document. But in there, in one section, he says, he gives an example about those clouds and liberated souls and non-liberated souls. And he said, when a soul, just like the sky, when the sky is cloudy, you can say, oh, see those clouds? There's the clouded portion of the sky and the unclouded portion of the sky. He said, so you have conditioned souls, liberated souls. There's one under the cloud of ignorance is upon them, and there's someone else who's liberated. He said, but just like the sky, when the clouds are removed from the sky, you can no longer distinguish between the section that was once covered and the section that was never covered. Someone like Chakravarti Thakur can, and give details about these particular gopis come from this section and they come from that. He can do that. But generally speaking, he's saying you can no longer distinguish between the once clouded portion and the never clouded portion. So he said, similarly, when the clouds of ignorance are removed from the conditioned soul, you can't engage in this type of distinction anymore. In fact, if you're not Chakrabarti Thakur, it might be offensive. You can't have people in Vaikuntha, saying like, you may have 4 arms now, but I remember when you were crawling on all 4s, okay? It can't be like that. Right? So when we look at these exalted souls, sometimes the example of Jada Bharat given, or even Guru Maharaj mentioned the example of Prahlad Maharaj. He's saying, in a former lifetime, and we say the Mahajan Prahlad Maharaj. I mean, he's Prahlad Maharaj, the 7th canto of Bhagavatam, Brihad Bhagavatam, Rita Nrsinga, Prahlad Nrsinga. But that Prahlad Maharaj, Guru Maharaj says, quoting Jiva Goswami, we hear in a former lifetime, and we say, well, is this Leela? Was it real? That's a subject of analysis. But in a former lifetime, we're told once, he wanted to enjoy a girl, and they went into the forest, and there was no place to go, but there was a dilapidated Nrsinga temple. And he took her to that temple, but because it was dilapidated and neglected, he cleansed the temple very nicely with some devotional mood. That's all we're told. When he did that, something in him, he did it very nicely, like in service to Nrsingadev. Long story short, he becomes the exalted Mahajan Prahlad Maharaj. So, and we never want to think offensively about him, but we're told, in the background, something like this there. So, there's also a famous sloka in the Bhagavatam. What does it say? Samasrita ye parapalava plavam mahatpadam punya jasho murare bhavam budhir vatsa parampadadyad vipadam natesham. Talks about how when when some soul crosses the ocean of nescience, like Mayami tam tarantite etam samastaya pratmanishtam buratar Hangsorishami Durantaparam Tamomukundangrini Sheveva. The way they do it, the way they've done it, is a path for everyone else. Just like in the world, in the forest, there's someone called a trailblazer. They make the first path. Then other people, if you're the first group are the ones who are kind of expert, they go, oh, yeah, actually you can see that there's a path here that most people wouldn't see. But then they take it, after a while, it becomes apparent to everyone, this is a path. Right? So it's something like that. You have the trailblazers who come down, and whether it's an eternally liberated associate taking fully the position of a mundane person, with desires, feelings, erotic, the whole thing, and then overcoming that and showing this is a path out of this. As Guru Maharaj says, to come out of the mud, you may have to walk through the mud for some time. Right? So that's there. So, and Guru Maharaj compares them to lighthouses. Like the lighthouses, they give you direction how to proceed, because the human form of life is compared to the boat, the guru, the captain, and the instructions of the Vedas, the winds. But it also reminds me of getting bad direction. I used to visit lighthouses whenever I could. I find them interesting. So there's one in Point Reyes in California. And the legend, you have to walk like 1,000 steps and get on this cliff, and it's all extraordinary. But they said the operator of the lighthouse, a little puggle, crazy. So he would get drunk, and every lighthouse is different. Like some flash 6 times a minute, some 4. They can't all be the same. That's how you know where you're going. So say theirs was supposed to be 6. He would change it to be like 8 or 3. So guys would be out in their boat like, I mean, the guy was nuts, right? So what did we learn from this? I know you're wondering. What do we learn from that? That if it may appear to be a lighthouse, but if there's a nut inside, you don't want to follow that. That's basically the idea. So just that someone may appear to be a Vedic authority, and this is kind of on topic, who were actually the great saints? And that's not always easy to see. I mean, tomorrow's Gadadhar Pandit's appearance day. We'll speak about that tomorrow, maybe something about Pundarik, Vidyanidhi, and others. But one lady who's a scholar from a prestigious university in America, she wrote this book about like the mad Puggle saints of Bengal. And I mean, there's just all different kinds of stuff. Like, one who sticks out in my mind is someone who's supposed to be like the multiple incarnation of like Krishna, Mahaprabhu, and Allah. Or, I mean, just like you can imagine all different type stuff. Some Puggle Bengali guy. But so she's showing, and she'll say like, well, this guy, a lot of people think he's really bogus, but here's his story. But interestingly, when she mentions Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, and she says, very interestingly, there's a unanimous consensus that he is genuine. There isn't one person who questions his authenticity or his substance. Everybody else, someone say, well, we're not too sure. Some people say this, She said, but when it comes to this Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, everyone says he's the real deal. Right? And she mentions one story there that people observed. We hear him chanting the holy name in the outhouse, etc. People were recorded saying that once after he left such a place, that the bricks were vibrating Krishna Nam. Those who were in the inanimate position. This is also Jiva Tattva, ultimately, Jiva souls, but in an inanimate, suspended state of animation, practically unconscious. They were brought to the level of pure Krishna consciousness by the association of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. So when disciple of Srila Saraswati Thakur, who was designated to go and preach in London, and I feel at this moment, just to mention one thing, that someone reminded me, Ashutosh Krishna Prabhu, that this year marks the 30th anniversary of the publication of The Search for Sri Krishna, Reality of the Beautiful. So when I presented that book to Srila Guru Maharaj, it was on Gaur, you're talking about a deadline, I presented it to him on Gaur Purnima evening when the moon had risen. At that moment, that's when I handed him the book. So the moon shining down, the Gaur Chandra, it's his birthday too. The Gaur Chandra shining down on Guru Maharaj, and he's got the book, and that's a whole other pastime. But the reason I want to mention is Guru Maharaj said, like, it was very significant to him too, and he said, 50 years ago to the day, to the moment, he said, we presented Sri Krishna Chaitanya to Srila Saraswati Thakur. He considered it that significant. That's what it reminded him of. So that book was the book to be carried by Saraswati Thakur's envoy to England to begin the Western preaching. And we've heard from Srila Guru Maharaj also that Srila Saraswati Thakur planned to spend the next 10 years of his life in the West preaching. He was going to go to England next. This was like the advance party. Right? So, but that gentleman, he came back, we're told, half converted, minus the shikha and the dress of many things had changed. Srila Prabhupada Swami Maharaj, Srila Guru Maharaj, and others, they were so eager, like this is, Mahaprabhu's prediction, the desire of Bhaktivinoda. This was a big deal. So they all went down to the dock where the ocean liner was coming to bring back Ban Maharaj and two Germans that he managed to collect along the way. And so, and you can see there's a photograph of this. And they're all there to receive them. But when they meet Ban Maharaj, at that time, some change took place in him. And when they all want to know, well, what's it like preaching Krishna consciousness in the Western world? And he said, they ask questions that cannot be answered. And they're like, really? And Srila Prabhupada, Swami Maharaj said, what are those questions? And then he started telling what the questions are. And one by one, Guru Maharaj answered all of them. The questions that cannot be answered. He answered all of them. And then Swami Maharaj went like, today, Europe has been defeated by Asia. It's a famous event. But then later, they take him to Srila Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Saraswati Thakur, he's obviously disappointed. And at one point, he's told, what you have is insufficient for these people. So his own man comes back damaged, faith damaged, many things. Right? Saraswati Thakur is dumbstruck. Right? Guru Maharaj said, Professor Sanyal, the fanatical follower of Saraswati, he wanted to strangle that man. But instead he said to him, he said, you have forgot the very basis of spiritual life, the first principle of spiritual life, which is what? Adal Guru Vashrayam, taking shelter at the lotus feet of Guru. You forgot your Guru, you've lost everything in the process. But then Guru Maharaj said, Saraswati Thakur had some time to recover, and he said, he mentioned Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. Because we know, Srila Saraswati Thakur, he's a Jyotishi, he's highly educated, everyone wants him to become their follower. No, his scholarly position is unmatched, unparalleled. But he's sent by Bhaktivinoda Thakur to take shelter at the lotus feet of Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, who is what? Functionally illiterate. He can't write his name. And when he comes to ask him for initiation, Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj says, I'll have to ask Mahaprabhu his permission. And Saraswati said, all right. But he's saying like, everyone else is like, they're begging him practically to become the disciple. Gaurkishore Das Babaji says, I'll have to ask Mahaprabhu. So he goes, wait, comes back after like a fortnight and presents himself again, and Babaji Maharaj says, forgot to ask. And the reason what Saraswati Thakur said, he wanted to check my scholarly ego. Like everyone else wants you like, oh, forgot to ask, like not important, you're not so important. So like he's dealing that way with Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So what is guru, disciple, guru, varga, and all these things? There's a world where Saraswati Thakur is treated this way by his master. Of course, ultimately, Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj accepts him, and this is peculiar, and this is the mystical nature of Krishna consciousness. So, who's arguably the greatest scholar of the day? Who's his guru? Someone who's functionally illiterate, can't write his name. Is this a joke? Or is there something real going on here? Right? As that same Babaji Maharaj, what did he tell some people? He said, you want Krishna Prem? The highest thing, love of Krishna? He said, you know, you can get it for 5 rupees. And everyone thinks like, how bogus is that? If someone came in here and told us you can buy Krishna Prem for $5 or 5 baht or whatever, with inflation, say 500 baht, we would like throw the guy out or something like that. Right? So when Babaji Maharaj says, you know, you can get Krishna praying, do you have 5 rupees? Right? Who has no money and no interest in money. He's saying, you know, if you got 5 rupees, you can get Krishna praying. It's all it costs. What does he mean? There are these 2 books of Narottam Thakur, the Prema Bhakti Chandrika, and with all the songs of Narottam. He's saying, and they each cost like 250 rupees, 250. That's what he meant. If you get these 2 books with the spiritual substance and concept that are in those books, you'll get Krishna praying. That's what he meant. So he's an enigmatic figure. So Saraswati Thakur turned to Ban Maharaj and said, my Guru Maharaj, meaning Gorkha Shordas Babaji Maharaj, said, cannot write his name. He said, but I found all spiritual knowledge in the one of the nails of his holy lotus hand. And one fingernail, I found all spiritual knowledge in a particle there. And he's not exaggerating. Saying, you don't understand how this works, who that personality is, what they can extend to you. So the here and there we hear examples, but it's almost an answer to the original question. The reason it's not told that they were out and out mundane persons is from the overview that once they achieve the liberated position, then you have to retroactively view everything else. Do you understand? There's the Mahabhagavata vision of things, the intermediate level, the Kanishta level. So from the ultimate view, everything's perfect, everything's divine, everything's a pastime. Maybe it was meant to happen that way. It's the Leela of someone. It's a very profound subject matter, actually. Because we hear, Jive Swarupai Krishna and Nityananda. We're the eternal servants of Krishna. So you say, well, what about the period where you're not really, activated your eternal servitorship? We're told, well, that's like a dream. Someone lying is dreaming, Guru Maharaj said, in the spiritual world, when you awaken to your spiritual identity, he said, and you start interacting with the others there, they'll say like, you were absent for some time. What might have been trillions of lifetimes. They said, you were gone for a little while, or what happened? No, I was lying under a tree dreaming. So there are many ways to approach this, but we're told, Mahajano Yena Kata Sapanta. By following the path of the Mahajans, then we can achieve our actual spiritual position, realize our spiritual identity. And it's all the difference in the world, how you move in the plane of faith. And I remember at a time when I had to make a critical decision about to, take the implications of taking shelter, permanent shelter at the lotus feet of Srila Guru Maharaj, how that would impact my life and other things. So I'm understanding certain things from Srila Guru Maharaj, you can say, in the faithful plane. But one person said to me, he said, oh, there is this seer in Swarupganj, and you should see him. He has some extraordinary mystical powers. I mean, it's such an important time in your life, and you need to make this decision. So, and many, big devotees go. There's some way an idea like this is sold to you. And foolishly, I agreed. But the day came to go, and it was like, for starters, it was Thursday afternoon. It was Brihaspati Barbella, right? The most inauspicious time. And then we go there. But I'm in Swarupganj, and the person leaves me on a rickshaw to go get this person. And I thought, this environment, this atmosphere is so divine. I was swallowed up by the Swarup-Ganj atmosphere, and then I felt perfect and perfectly adjusted. But now this other thing had been set into motion. Then finally, they get me, I'm brought to the man. The man's sitting under a picture of Ma Kali on the wall with red lips, red teeth and everything, smoking a cigarette like, there was one man in the southern part of the country who was your enemy. You know, it's this kind of stuff, right? So anyway, long story short, let's just say that what I'm contemplating doing under the, on the basis of my faith in Srila Guru Maharaj, that what he's advising me externally is similar. Say it's the same movement. Let's just say it's the same movement externally. Right? That makes this more interesting. So anyway, those who know that nothing, like the sun never sets on the British Empire, nothing goes on in Chaitanya Saraswat Mat that Gurudev and Guru Maharaj don't know about. So by the next time I come to Guru Maharaj, he knows, they know everything. That I've gone across the river to Swarup-Ganj, I've met with the Ma Kali man, and the whole deal, right? And Guru Maharaj, he just says one thing to me. He looks at me, and already I'm like full of shame. He didn't say a word, I'm just like... And Guru Maharaj said, Mahajano yena gata sapanta. We have to follow the advice of the Mahajans. I said, yes. And why I say this is of particular interest is because both are the same in terms of external movement, but one is moving under the faithful plane, like this is the advice of Guru and Vaishnav, Sadhu Shastra, Guru, Vaishnav. You're moving in the faithful plane. So you're sheltered. What you're doing is akarmic. It's divine. It will be nourishing, progressive. It's everything. It will give you, it's life-giving, eternally life-giving. The same exact movements for another reason are vikarma, will take you down, will ruin you. The same exact movements. So where's karma located? Guru Maharaj will say, in the mind. That's the seat of karmic activity. It's not the action so much. That's why in law, when they have like especially murder, they will talk about intent. So they have to establish criminal intent. Like there's no doubt someone was murdered, they were killed. But they say, but we need to determine guilt and subsequent punishment. We need to, interrogate the person, find out what were they thinking? Why did this happen? What's the cause behind it all? And when that's determined, motive, intent, then you can establish innocence or guilt. So karma is actually like that. It's not as much the movement, but the motive for the movement. Right? So, anyway, when I would sometimes with Guru Maharaj allow my intellect and analytical abilities to get the upper hand and start like A plus B equals C kind of thing about some exalted devotee's background. Once Guru Maharaj, he said, you're going to break your head if you keep thinking like this. He said, actually, we want to be in a position to receive their grace. So we don't want to look too far in the background. And this is the difference between spiritual culture and material culture. because this is the cultivation of faith. So an example is given to help us understand this, because we have a tendency to put all the emphasis on objective reality and ignore the subjective aspect, when spiritual culture puts the maximum amount of emphasis on the subjective aspect while de-emphasizing the objective. Did I say that right? Yeah, the subjective and objective. So what is the nyai, the books of logic? What do they say? Nagna matrika nyai. This is a fault in thinking. And what is it called? The fault of the naked mother logic. And what it means is, if you have a child, there's your mother, you're a child. And the child starts thinking, my mother was once a naked girl. So instead of seeing as mother, the nourishing mother figure and all that, which is true, the actual reality at the present, if we look in the background and say, yeah, but she was once a naked girl, and you think of her in that way, there's some fault on your part. And even though it may be technically, objectively true, it has no bearing on her present position. So that has to be factored in and understood also. So when we're dealing with devotees, particularly, and we don't want to lose the grace of the devotees and of Krishna, right? How we view his devotees, those who are near and dear to him, and those who have dedicated their lives to promoting Krishna consciousness. We can't say like, oh, but in the background there's this, or in the background there's that. And in this context, that means even so-called objective, observable, objective criteria will deceive you, not enlighten you or give you a better glimpse of who they are. It will actually prevent you and deceive you from understanding who is before you. So that's the nature of spiritual culture. So, and perhaps from this point of view, not so much is told about the objective background of different exalted personalities who've achieved the liberated position, but we can understand from Guru Maharaj's example, his famous 3 types of guru example, where he said, one type of guru, they're in the highest position, 2 feet in the spiritual world, extending one here, they're taking from here to there. We can understand that. Another group who has 2 feet here, but recently, or relatively speaking, now they have a position there, so 1 foot here, 1 foot there, they're taking from here to there. That we can understand. But then he said something very interesting. He said, a 3rd class we may conceive. And he said, 2 feet in the mud, like that. 2 feet in the mud. He said, but their eyes fixed on Vaikuntha, and they're saying, let us go there. He said, all 3 are doing the function of guru, which is enacted from where? The Madhyam Adhikari, intermediate position. Hare Krishna. Any other question? Yes. Yes, that guru, we will think, oh, guru is in the highest position. Yes, but the function of guru is enacted from the intermediate position. Why? Because as we told, the Mahabhagavata, who's in the highest position, everything's perfect, nothing needs adjusting. So very often they do not take disciples. There's nothing to adjust. Everything's just perfect. They see Krishna in the background of everything, the perfect, infinite, divine, absolute wave and movement of everything. So it's only from the 2nd class position that you can say, well, this is desirable, that's undesirable, this is objectionable, that's not objectionable, this is progressive, that's regressive. So we're told the Mahabhagavata has to come down to the 2nd class position, which is one of discrimination, good and bad, etc., as I just mentioned, then they can give advice and to disciples say, you should do this and not do that. You should move in this way and not that way. That's why those examples, Lokanath Goswami, Gorkha Das, they're not going to have disciples. He's only accepting Saraswati Thakur because Bhaktivinoda Thakur is arranging this. Otherwise, he's not making disciples. His vision is so extraordinary. Who's going to be his disciple? And what is their necessity? There should be some necessity that leads you to approach a particular guru. Right? And we'll talk about that tomorrow. Why Gadadhar Pandit approaches Pundarik Vidyanidhi as opposed to someone else. And we can understand, Pundarik Vidyanidhi is not normally making disciples. Why would he? And that's why we can revisit it once again, Gurudev's statement, which gives you a hint of his adhikar, if you want to say, when he said, if Krishna doesn't want to reveal himself to someone, why should I? And I've mentioned, if I had, he didn't ask me to answer that. It was like a, a rhetorical statement. But if I had to answer it, I would say, well, you're more merciful than Krishna. But he's making a point. And Guru Maharaj makes the same point, but in a slightly different way, by saying, for it to be a divine transaction, divinity's actually got to be there in the background transacting. Just that we say everything is divine, or this person is divine, or that doesn't make it so. Is Krishna really in the background moving something? As he told me once, during some critical times, and in the midst of being critical, he said, before you go to challenge someone with divine backing, have you got divine backing in your challenge? I went like, it made me think. We can say anything and everything, but whether it's true and substantial is another thing. And then how will we, what's the litmus test for that? How will you judge if something is substantial or not? We come back to Sadhu, Shastra, Guru, Vaishnav. And to the degree that we are acquainted with these things, then you can apply that criteria for assessment. And like, just to give an example, Babaji Maharaj. So because he's an avadut, bhaktavaduta murteye, ordinary people think he's mad, like Sukadev. They're not thinking, oh, this is some exalted, spiritually realized person. They're just saying, it's a crazy guy. So what are children doing? They're throwing things at him, calling him names, this exalted soul. That's why Guru Maharaj pointed out that same Ban Maharaj, later at one point he took Babaji, but as a Babaji you're not supposed to object to anything. And he would like get in fights with rickshaw-wallas and stuff like that. So he said, he goes, I can't do it. I can't be a Babaji. It's like, just drive me crazy, these people. So he left it and went back to just being a Maharaj who can yell at people. But anyway, so Gorkha Das Babaji Maharaj, the kids are throwing, pelting him with dirt clods and things, calling him abusive names. And what is his response? He says, Krishna, I know it's these children, but you're the one through them. You're throwing the dirt and calling me all these names. It's you who's behind all of this. But I also know how to deal with you. So I will complain to Ma Yashoda, and she'll give you a good licking, for your misbehavior. That's a Mahabhagavata. He's functionally not ready for the guru role with the disciples. So what are we told? They descend to the second class position, which is one of discrimination and diversity and duality, and from there give scriptural advice and the advice of the Mahajans, etc., so that the disciples can make progress. The third, so then we could say the third class is going up to the second class position, what Guru Maharaj calls the inspired side of the Vaishnava. He says there's the Vaishnava and their particular level of adhikar, which could be third, second, first. He said, but the inspired side of the Vaishnava is the Guru. So we can say, even a third class devotee, their inspired side, we can detect the Guru there. And proceed, take that advice seriously as something being substantial and allow it to guide us in our movements. But what is the hallmark? What separates third-class devotion from second-class devotion is being able to detect who is a Vaishnava. And Vaishnavata, degree of Vaishnava. Right.
You cannot call this full realization of divine.
Right. That's why, like when we say sadhu, spiritually, advanced personality, there's a lot of gradation there. Because generally speaking, who are Brahmins? Brahmins are those who, they're living in this world, but they're ruled by spiritual consideration. Minimally, that's who a Brahmin is. The word Brahma is there. So their whole life, whatever they do, is under the influence of some spiritual consideration. But again, there's gradation. As connotation increases, denotation decreases. So, like we saw, Shankaracharya, Mayavai, but spiritually advanced personalities. So the general spiritual conception, then the gradations of refined spiritual conception. Vaishnavism. Sri Vaishnavas, Madhva Vaishnavas, different one, Gaudiya Vaishnavas. As connotation increases, denotation decreases. So, and in our line, what? The Rupa Nuga line, what? The angle of vision of Srimati Radharani is, and through Lalita and Rupa and Raghunath. That is what is guiding all of those aspiring in the Rupa Nuga line. That sort of, not generic, off-the-shelf spirit, which Sukadev says, that's how I started. Parinishti topi narigunye uttama sloka lilaya. I was already situated in the nirguna plane. No mundane, not even a trace amount of mundane tendency or consideration in me. But from that position, I was captured by Krishna conception. So it's not just, people in the mundane. No. I was in the nirguna plane and carried away by Krishna conception to another domain. So what to speak of you? And I'm now broadcasting that nirguna Krishna conception, I'm broadcasting it here in the Saguna world. And if you can tune into it, you can come out of the Saguna world into the nirguna plane and into the uppermost region of the nirguna plane, the aprakrita abode of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan, where the majestic aspect of divinity is in a suppressed position. Mukti mukulitanjali sevatesman dharmartha kama gataya samaya pratiksha. But should the devotees need something for some particular reason, mukti, siddhi, everything is waiting to serve them. As in the case, we're talking about Gaura Rasikananda Prabhu. Right? One Muslim fakir heard this Rasikananda, he's a higher type of spiritual personality, Vaishnava devotee, etc. And this fakir, he is already powerful and could manipulate the mundane at will. So he thought, I'll go and see how real he is, if he's the real thing or not. But he thought, but I need to make an impressive entrance so he'll be impressed with me. So he got on a tiger and commanded the tiger to carry him to see Rasikananda Prabhu. So he shows up, riding on a tiger, and I've come to see Rasikananda. And Rasikananda Thakur's assistant said, well, let me go get him. And when he goes to get him, we're on a broken wall of bricks, Rasikananda brushing his teeth. And the attendant comes and says, this Muslim fakir came here, he wants to have your darshan. He came riding on a tiger. It's pretty impressive. And Rasikananda said, oh, then I should think. He said, wall, take me to the fakir. And the brick wall started moving. And when the fakir saw him arrive on a moving brick wall, he got down from his tiger and gave his dandavats and said, I understand you're a superior personality. That's the meaning of mukti, mukuli tanjali sevate sman dharma artha kama gataya samaya pratiksha of Bilva Mangal Thakur, saying all these things, devotees, they're not using it for their self-aggrandizement, but they're waiting to serve the devotees if necessary. Hare Krishna.